Kierkegaard wrote this book as a doctor speaking beside a bed, and the patient is you. His diagnosis in one line: almost every person alive is in despair, and most of them have no idea, not sadness, not depression, something underneath both that can wear a smile for 40 years. We assume a man knows whether he's in despair. He says fine, so he's fine. Kierkegaard says that's like letting a patient diagnose himself, because one of the most common forms of this illness is feeling perfectly well. He goes further, and this is the line that stops people. Happiness itself can be despair. Peace, harmony, a good life, and hidden in the deepest recess of it, an anxious dread the person never looks at. He gives an image you won't forget. Imagine a house with several floors. The upper story is bright, spacious, standing empty and available, and the owner chooses to live in the cellar. Not only chooses it, loves it, and grows furious if anyone mentions the rooms upstairs. That, he says, is the ordinary human condition, and the fury at being told is itself the disease talking. So how do you know? He offers one test, and it's simple. Have you ever, in your whole life, felt a disquiet you couldn't name? A dread of some unknown something, or of a possibility inside yourself you don't dare approach? That flicker is the symptom, and most people spend their lives arranging their affairs so that it never gets a chance to speak. Now, what is despair actually about? You think you know? It's about the thing that went wrong. The job, the person who left, the life that didn't happen. Kierkegaard's no. That's the screen. Watch him take it apart. A man's motto is either Caesar or nothing. He doesn't become Caesar. He's devastated. And he thinks he's devastated about not becoming Caesar. He isn't. He's devastated about himself, because now he has to be a man who failed, and he cannot stand the sight of that man. Notice what he really wants. Not Rome, he wants to not be himself anymore. And here's the sting. If he had become Caesar, he'd have been in despair too. He'd just never have felt it, because success would have let him escape himself in a pleasant way. Either Caesar or nothing, both were exits from being this particular person. So Kierkegaard gives the formula for all despair: to want to be rid of yourself, and then the trap. You cannot do it. He calls this the sickness unto death, not because it kills you, but because it can't. The agony is that you can't die from it. Every attempt to escape yourself is performed by the self you're escaping. It's a fire that never finishes burning. Think about your own version. When you couldn't stand your life, what did you actually want? Not a different apartment, not a different job. You wanted to not be the person sitting there. And there is no door out of that room. Now, the form of this sickness that almost nobody recognizes, because the world hands out medals for it. Kierkegaard called it despair by not venturing. The despair of becoming exactly what you're supposed to be. Every person, he says, is born angular. Something specific, awkward, particular. A self. And that self needs polishing. But it was never meant to be ground smooth. Yet look what most of us do. You watch the crowd. You learn what works. You notice which parts of you cause friction. And you file them down until you are, in his phrase, ground smooth as a pebble, current as a well-used coin. And what happens to that man? He succeeds. Of course he does. There's no self left to get in the way. He adapts to everything. He becomes competent, respected, well-adjusted. Far from being seen as in despair, he's exactly what a man is supposed to be. He has forgotten his own name in the deepest sense, and he got promoted for it. Then Kierkegaard drops the sentence that should ruin your evening. Every other loss gets noticed. An arm, a leg, your money, your marriage. But losing your own self can happen quietly, as if it were nothing. No one comments. There's no funeral. And he asks, if I risk something and get it wrong, life punishes me, and the punishment teaches me. But if I never risk anything at all, who helps me then? If I avoid every venture, gain every advantage, and lose myself, what then? So you rebel. You refuse the crowd. You decide, I will not be the self they made. I'll build my own. From nothing, on my own terms, answering to no one. Sounds like freedom. Kierkegaard calls it defiance, and he says it's the more sophisticated version of the same disease. His verdict is brutal. Such a man with a king country. He rules over nothing, because he's ruling a self he didn't create and can't ground. Every version he builds is an experiment, dissolvable tomorrow, subject to a revolution he himself can call at any moment. So he keeps constructing brilliant self-control, impressive discipline, a whole personality built like a poem, and at the bottom of it, nothing to stand on. and there's a darker form. Sometimes a person carries some defect, some wound, some cross they can't be rid of, and instead of seeking help, they take offense at existence itself with the torment as a protest. Rather than accept help, which would mean the humiliation of admitting need, they would rather keep the pain. Kierkegaard has an image for this that is almost cruel in its precision. Imagine a printing error in a book that became conscious of itself and refused to be corrected. It stands there and says, no, I will not be erased. I will remain as proof that the author was a bad writer. That's the person who clings to their grievance, because the grievance is the evidence they were wronged. They'd refuse rescue if it arrived, because being rescued means giving up the case. So what's the cure? Kierkegaard gives it in one sentence, the sentence the whole book navigates by. To be willing to be the self you actually are, and to rest that self transparently in the power that made it. That's his definition of health. It's also his definition of faith. And notice what's missing. Not become a better self. Not fix yourself. Self-improvement applied to this problem only digs the hole deeper, because the crack isn't only between you, it's between you and your ground. You cannot be the foundation of a thing you didn't build. Then he tells a parable. A mighty emperor sends for a poor day laborer, a man who never imagined the emperor knew he existed, who would tell his grandchildren about merely glimpsing him once. And the emperor summons him to say, I want you for my son-in-law. What does the laborer do? He's embarrassed, bewildered. In his heart, he half suspects he's being mocked. That, Kierkegaard says, is Christianity, and that reaction is what he calls offense. People think they reject it because it's too gloomy, too strict. He says, no, you reject it because it's too high. It makes you something so exalted you can't accept it. Offense is an admiration, an envy turned against yourself. And the last thing in this severe book is unexpectedly tender. Even God has one thing he cannot do. He can come all the way down, suffer, invite everyone, but he cannot make the offer safe to receive. The same gift that could be your greatest blessing might become your deepest misery, and love cannot remove that risk without destroying the freedom that makes it a gift. So all he can say is his blessed is the one who is not offended in me. Not a proof, an offer, and a door you walk through yourself.